Welcome to the Life You're Made For with me, Dr. Heather Penny. We're going to be having conversations that talk about us spiraling up versus spiraling down, because we all want to be living lives that are about thriving, not just surviving. This is the life you're made for. So let's get going. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to have a good friend and colleague of mine, Jennifer Morton. Hi, Jen.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here with you today.
She is the CEO of the Association of the Golf Merchandisers, and we've just been having so much fun talking about culture and conversations around gray space. But more importantly, I love the conversations with Jen because we believe that leadership starts from within, and we're only as great as who we are and how we hold spaces of grace within us. So she was one of my endorsers on my last book, my most recent book, Grace Space. And I asked her to endorse it because I only ask people to endorse it who are actually practicing it, because gray space is actually pretty instinctive and intuitive. What I'm trying to do as an author and as a coach is to really put language around it. So I think I want to start there, Jen. How has grace space influenced you as a leader and even just as a human being?
Reading through the book and before coming on the podcast, I have read the book. I've read it now 2 to 3 times. I really recognize how much I took from it through my first read through. And now looking at it, I think my takeaway on it is that as a leader, we're here to serve, right? We're not here to take, we're here to serve. In my case, I'm here to serve my members. I'm also very much here to serve my staff. And having that as an awareness, having that as the thought here that's my purpose here leading this company is to help build up and help my staff grow and thrive.
I love that. Help it just grow and thrive. As we think about grace space, I use the idea of practice. It's something that we have to practice. Is there one of the practices, there's 7 of them in the book, but is there one that's standing out to you that you're helping your team grow and thrive in?
I think there's so much of it. I don't want to say all of it because that seems very, over the top. But on the same hand, I really do believe that, the communication, I'm going to go into one other piece is the nonverbal, you have the responding versus reacting, which there's a lot of pieces of it where as I read through it, I'm like, well, yeah, I'm good at that. And I'm good at that. And, the trust piece is really a foundation of the culture that we come up in. But I think I have your book in front of me. So, number one, the responding versus reacting.
Right.
That was important to me because to me, that's a really big learning space in my own world. Right. And I would say I tend to absolutely react more emotionally than to start with. And so just the practicing of, when somebody's talking to you with, shaking your head up and down and the nonverbal cues that you are, inadvertently showing and sharing. Yeah. That's really good reminders for me personally. And, like I said, this second time through reading the book, there's highlights in it from, I'm like, yes. So, that to me was a really, a great place for me.
Well, and I think what I've loved about you too, it's authentic leadership. I know you personally too. I mean, we've sat on the benches of the baseball games and cheered our boys on, and we've been part of each other's family communities, which has been so fun. And I think that's one of the things too, I want to kind of pivot over into creating the spaces of grace. You and I are both raising kids and they're adulting now. They're adult children. So I guess that's an oxymoron. They're adults, period.
But they will always be our babies.
Thank you. They will always be our babies. Yes, exactly. And I think just that idea of responding versus reacting, that's one of the spaces that I had to really be conscious of as I shifted away from the little kids into the adult children that are moving into this world and saying, wait, our goal is to launch them, not to continuously give them feedback and give them advisement. It's to launch them and help them feel empowered. To me, that's this idea of grace space, particularly as we look at responding versus reacting.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you said that absolutely perfectly. Um, and I know I've probably said this to you in the past, but I really see my role not only as a leader,
Mhm.
but as a parent, and that is, you always think of the steering the ship and in the boat, and you're the captain behind the wheel, or you're the parent.
Mhm.
I really prefer thinking of it as being the rudder and letting your staff or letting your children
Mhm.
have that control to
Yeah.
feel like they're, in charge of themselves and their own lives, but us being there behind the scenes and, there just to help guide them
Mhm.
and ensure that they're on the right path, right?
Mhm.
But where they are the
So
ones who have
true.
control.
Oh, I love that. I love that with the rudder. It also syncs back up to the idea of servant leadership. Our people need to be led and guided. I mean, unapologetically they do. But that doesn't mean that we're trying to control them or that we're reacting to them or we're, losing trust with them or anything like that. It's really stepping into that, creating that space of grace around us as leaders, but around our people to innovate, make decisions, and really even fail at times too, right?
And I don't even think there is fail. I think
Right.
it's just this opportunity to see, here's the direction you're going and it's not working. What can you learn from it? What can you take from it?
Hmm.
And how can you grow and be stronger afterwards? I really like, I think being in the grace space is that having the opportunity to fail and know that there is that safety net with you,
Hmm.
right? I'm
Hmm.
a huge proponent of just throwing everything you can at the board or on, and seeing what sticks.
Hmm.
And the things that don't stick are they bad ideas, or are they bad things that we tried, or did they
Hmm.
just need a little bit more help?
Hmm.
And so you're right, and I think gray space and that whole fail thing are so intertwined,
Yeah.
because so you have our children who are afraid to step outside the lines or step outside the coloring on their coloring
Hmm.
page, because
Yeah.
that's a
Hmm.
fail, versus give them that freedom to color outside the lines, and give your staff that freedom to color outside the lines, and see what creativity, see
Hmm.
what develops and shines when you get it back.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go a little deeper here, Jed. Stay with me because I know you will.
Here we go.
Here we go, Jed. Diving in. How do you offer grace to yourself?
Oh, so this is such a good question, and it's so something that I have. Now we're going to go, very personal, because
Yeah.
doing a lot of reading, doing a lot of stuff. I tend to feel like there's two selves. There's the
Hmm.
emotional self, which is led by the heart, and then
Hmm.
there's the other self that's led by the brain, right?
Hmm.
And the more I've talked and thought internally and stuff, I think the voice in your head is frequently the voice of your parents.
Hmm.
And in this case, my mother, which isn't necessarily the kindest of voices.
Yeah.
And I have someone on my staff, Ariel, who whenever I'm very kind to always towards others, but sometimes when I'm not necessarily as kind towards
Yeah.
myself, Ariel is in here going, well, and she'll say something, and I'm like, you are the voice of grace. I literally tell her this. You are the voice of grace in this office.
Yeah.
And it's such a good reminder to talk to oneself
Yeah.
with kindness. And so that is something that I am actively working on.
Hmm.
But I will also tell you it's still a weakness for me.
I agree. And that's why I went there because all my fingers are pointing back to me. I wrote the book on it, Jed. So I'm just going to be honest and transparent, and a little vulnerable here. I wrote the book on it, and yet I can be the least grace filled person toward myself. And you went exactly where I want to go, which is because I work with so many high achieving leaders. And so I've started to ask this question more and more. How do you show grace to yourself? And sometimes it's a deer in headlights. Most of the time, it's everyone going, oh, yep, she's going there. All right, I'll tell you, this is hard for me. I am kinder to my own people than I am to me. And as a coach, of course, I am sticking up for the high achieving leader, saying you get to offer. spaces of grace to yourself. You get to respond to yourself. And more importantly, you get to stay curious to who you
Yes.
are and how you're evolving. And isn't that a form of grace?
It absolutely is. And I had another friend as well who just said to me, treat yourself or ask yourself the questions or how you treat yourself the same way you would do that with your
Mm-hmm.
friend, your child, your
Mm-hmm.
staff. And the amount of times I try to pause now and
Mm-hmm.
really think that through, and your words as well, the stay curious,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is so well said. It's that take a moment, step back, be curious about where is this coming from,
Mm-hmm.
and then and just that moment of taking, stay curious, take a deep breath,
Mm-hmm.
however that works for you. It really can shift the mindset and let you
Mm-hmm.
see where you're approaching this from, which is cool. I mean,
Yeah.
let's think about it. I mean, how
Yeah.
cool, amazing, and
Yeah.
spectacular is that?
Yeah. It really is. And you caught on to the thread that I put through all 7 practices of grace space. When we look at responding versus at reacting, questioning versus accusing, trust versus fear, freedom versus control, and so on. The thread that runs through it all is curiosity.
Yes.
And it's so much easier to tell people what to reach for than to tell them what not to do. Right? When we tell people, don't get defensive, don't get defensive. Well, what are we going to do? We're only thinking about the energy about not being defensive. And that's not good enough. What I want to give people is a lifeline that says, hey, you know what? If you reach for curiosity, first of all, your emotional intelligence will go up. The second thing that will really happen is it de-escalates whatever tension's happening in the relationship or the room. And as a leader, you get to model it, or as a parent, you get to model it. Don't our kids want just our curiosity? They want to be known by us. So do our employees and our people. They want to be known by us as leaders, and they want Jennifer and Heather to sit there and say, I care about you, and how I'm going to serve you right now is to be curious. That's the thread that runs all through Grace Space.
Absolutely. It's such a powerful book. It's so powerful because it's so easily digestible. The 7 lessons, and each one, and I love how you added like tips. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, because I'm a highlighter, so I
Yeah.
highlighted things, and then at the end there's basically, it's like a workshop in
Mm-hmm.
itself, and that
Mm-hmm.
being able then to be reflective
Mm-hmm.
and think through the areas where there are a couple of chapters where I'm like patting myself on the back. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
and many of the chapters where I'm like, yes, I can improve on that.
Yeah.
Yes, this is, and then a couple of the chapters where I'm like, okay,
Right.
let's take a real look at
Mm-hmm.
where I can do better and improve.
Right. And it also, I mean, we all need aerials in our life. I've got my aerials too, right? So we need people to stand with us on creating grace space toward ourselves and with our people. And so when we create that language out there of, hey, I'm choosing to be curious, I'm choosing to ask questions versus accuse. We are holding ourselves accountable as leaders, but really as humans to step out and say, you get to hold me accountable for this, but more importantly, you get to support me in this. It's not about perfection, it's about practice. And again, even though I write all this, do all this, I'm like, are you kidding? These are the 7 practices that I am constantly practicing, especially as my life grows and gets bigger and even more successful. That's the shadow side of success. The stress can go up. We need these 7 practices so that we can allow our lives to get bigger and grow into more and more abundance.
And I agree, and I think a lot about culture, right? So
Mm-hmm.
many companies talk about the culture of the business,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, here's our culture, here's our, the what we're hiring for: honesty, integrity, loyalty, all these
Mm-hmm.
things. Um, and we've done that here as well. But I very much take that and I hire based on the core values of that individual.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm totally coming back to Grace Space. Grace Space, having a staff that imbibes these feelings. I mean, the culture of that company comes from the employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not handed down from the top, but it absolutely is something that needs to breed and grow and be, one. And the grace space, when people talk about trying to establish these companies that, no one's loyal, no one's,
Mhm.
people move around all the time. I truly believe that if you build a company based
Mhm.
on the teachings of grace space, you are going to have an environment where people want to stay. People
Mhm.
want to be part of an organization where they feel seen, where they
Mhm.
have the freedom to be curious,
Mhm.
where they have the opportunity to grow and thrive
Mhm.
and know that they're seen and heard.
Mhm.
And that was the other piece of this that really stood with me
Mhm.
is just gray space is how a company really should
Mhm.
and can create the culture of their workforce.
You're right on, Jen. It's just making me think of just a couple weeks ago, I did my first leadership team retreat around it. And it was a weekend retreat around because Gray Space just came out a couple months ago and I'd done some keynotes on it, but I hadn't done like a 3-day retreat around it. And what I did was I handed off a practice to each of the leaders there. And there were 8 leaders there, and they each took a practice. They read about it, they came back, told everyone how they wanted to apply it for themselves as a leader, how they wanted to offer it to their team, and then how they wanted to stand for it as a leadership team culture. And it was so powerful because it tested my hypothesis of this is instinctual, this is intuitive. I didn't have to teach on the 7 practices. I just assigned them all. And I said, okay, here's a couple hours. Now come back and teach the group. And it was so powerful to watch them apply it. My biggest fear is they were going to sit there and quote the author. It was going to be an awkward, egocentric exercise, right? I was like, oh, please don't be doing that. None of them did. They caught the vision of it, which is, oh, yeah, I want to question versus accuse. I want to learn to trust versus fear. And I remember even the trust one was so powerful. That's how I ended the book. And the emotions in the room were so high because everybody has a fear story and everybody has a trust story and everyone has that emotional response to where grace went really well and where grace went really bad.
If we really focus on that fear versus trust, it's
Mhm.
interesting because that would be another one that when I think so many of us live in this fear
Mhm.
that a lot of us aren't even aware that
Mhm.
we're circling in.
Mhm.
And um, and I know that I had a very difficult time with trust, very, very difficult, and feeling like, you're just putting up these walls to protect you. That may have worked as a child, but as you
Mhm.
grow, they're maladaptive, right? They
Mhm.
don't protect you, they don't serve you, they don't help you.
Mhm.
And so much of what you wrote in there that as soon as you open yourself up to trust,
Mhm.
and you said, you can't just blindly trust
Yeah.
everyone who's
Yeah.
there to sell you an island, but
Yeah.
it opens up your world and it
Mhm.
expands your opportunities. And so much of what I already believe in of
Mhm.
when you need somebody or when you need something
Mhm.
to help you grow, that individual just enters your life, right? And
Mhm.
part of that is because you're no longer living in a state of fear. You're living in a
Yes.
in a life that allows you to be open to those possibilities and to those opportunities to present themselves.
You're so right on. And trust is so multifaceted. As we age and grow, you're right on. We get more wisdom on who to trust with what topic. If I want to talk about parenting, I know who I want to talk to about it. If I want to talk about career moves, I know who I want to talk to about it. But learning how to have those conversations around trust, but more importantly, trusting the process, trusting our people to join us, trusting the right guides will come along when we have more questions than answers. Trusting is so multifaceted. And when we choose trust, you're right on. The world begins to open up in new facets. It's just learning to pivot away from fear because fear can be so dominating, can't it? It stops us and paralyzes us from so much.
It does. And it's such a shame how you don't even, I think, fully recognize you're in that until
Yeah.
you allow yourself that opportunity to start stepping outside of it. And then the more and more you recognize it, and I always have my own personal thought. I'm like, I was living in the house, right?
Mhm.
Not literally living in the house, but, living in the
Mhm.
house. And as soon as you start stepping out, you're like, oh, there's a town. And then, you step out even further and you're like, wow, there's a city and there's a state, there's an entire world that just
Mhm.
starts opening itself up to you.
Mhm.
And that absolutely is built upon a foundation of allowing yourself to trust and
Mhm.
stepping away from the fear.
You're right on. And many of us, to your point, don't even realize how we're just swimming in it. We've been saturated in it. And, my first book, I talk about the false beliefs versus the true beliefs. False beliefs are just so fear driven. I'm not enough. I'm not able to advance in this position. I don't have what it takes. I need to wait till I'm more ready. These are all false beliefs I hear on a daily basis. And, honestly, a lot of them are so similar. It's why I even wrote a bank of false beliefs. But false beliefs are really motivated by fear. True beliefs are motivated by trust. I get to trust myself. I get to
Mhm.
trust the process. I get to maybe trust a higher power, whatever it is that we need to trust in and trust the whole process around it. It becomes really a very cool exercise because we're not sitting there trying to manage our fears, which is a low level way to spend our emotional energy, to be honest. We're able to start engaging trust at a much higher level. And that's when our world opens up with new solutions, new creativity, new innovations, and things that we really need to move forward in our life.
And if that's not just the most exciting, like adventure ahead, I don't know what is. I mean,
Yeah.
wake up every morning and it's like, it's like the world is brighter and colors are more vivid. It's spectacular.
Yes. And there's so much talk around vulnerability. It's honestly, it's a more intelligent way to be vulnerable. I totally agree with vulnerability and Brene Brown's work around it. I just love her research on it. And I want to build on it and say, I want to empower people to be vulnerable where they need to be vulnerable. Like, for instance, I'm having a hard time trusting. I realize I'm living in so much fear as I share it with a trusted friend or colleague. I'm able to have the words or the language around it. Or I feel myself getting really defensive right now and I want to choose receptivity. I'm watching people have the language around it. Again, it doesn't mean they're mastering it. They're just saying out loud, this is what I'm rejecting and this is what I'm inviting in. This is what I'm fighting against and this is what I'm trying to reach for. And watching people say it out loud has been really powerful for me to see how people are utilizing grace space to change just their spaces around them and the environments and the relationships that they're living and leading in.
And I think, you mentioned earlier how, gray space is very intuitive. It's very,
Mhm.
and I think that really ties into what you're saying right now,
Mhm.
because as people read the book, you don't get like, wait, what is this? You're
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, I recognize this. I see that. And then having that ability to be like, well, that makes sense. I
Mhm.
get that. Maybe I do need to
Mhm.
stop and think about this and think it through, and having that ability to just see what it is that you're saying
Mhm.
laid out, to be able to be like, oh no, I have felt that. But now, getting the mind part in there to be like, to help with that,
Yeah.
determination and stuff, allows them to then have the curiosity
Mhm.
to, in those moments where they can just say, why am I?
Yeah.
Why is my initial reaction
Mhm.
here anger or something?
Mhm.
Let me be curious about that
Yeah.
before before I do respond further. And I
Mhm.
think that is such a wonderful takeaway and
Mhm.
wonderful lesson that you
Mhm.
have interweaved throughout that entire book.
Well, it allows us to be in process, which again, another form of grace, right? I haven't
Yes.
arrived. You haven't arrived. I witnessed a president do this the other day, and it was a shining moment, Jen. I don't even think she realized how amazing it was, but I got to witness her saying one of her executive team members had said something, and I was like, ooh, that might be a little triggering. And I know these people well enough to know what could be some of the sensitive topics. So I'm sitting in the room going, oh boy. And I watched her go, I am feeling so defensive and I don't want to be. So I'm going to say something and I don't want to be defensive, but I'm finding myself fighting against it. And it was so much grace in the room where the other executive leader realized they kind of had stepped on a land grenade there and wanted to hear what the other person's perspective was. And I watched this whole executive team manage it. They didn't even need me. I was just a fly on the wall at that moment. And I didn't know if I was going to have to step in or not, but I realized no, they were empowered with these gray space tools to say out loud, wow, that comment just made me defensive. And I'm trying to stay curious and I'm trying to reach for receptivity. Can you help me understand what's behind that more? And I watched him unpack a really potentially volatile conversation that could have gotten really sticky and could have gotten sideways really quick. And I was just so proud of them. And I was just grateful that they had embraced this language to help them step into messy spaces. And I'm a huge fan of shortcuts too, where I'm like, this is a great shortcut. You don't have to sit there and process it or hire a mediator or counselor. You actually get to handle it yourself and feel equipped and empowered to say, this is what I'm fighting against and this is what I'm reaching for.
That's beautiful. What a wonderful moment for you just to
Yeah.
see, you know, to see it in practice
Yeah.
and how it just pulls the team together instead
Yeah.
of, like you said,
Yeah.
maybe pushing apart. And those things, in my opinion, you start having those things and they just build and build and build. And so,
Right.
to just get rid of that angst and anxiety on the front end, and to be able to come out of a comment that you didn't necessarily mean to say, and to be able to continue moving forward as a team and not as individuals. That's amazing. That is absolutely what Gray Space is meant to be.
It is. It is. And it allows us to brace our vulnerabilities. All of us have it. I don't care how much you've done in life or how far you've gone or how high you've achieved or anything. We're all dealing with imposter syndromes, fears, false beliefs, insecurities that unexpectedly just surprise us around different corners that we aren't anticipating. And being able to have a language that says, hey, I'm really struggling right now with trust. As I wrapped up this last leadership retreat, the leader that shared on trust literally said, I have fears in my life and this is what I'm fearful of, and shared them with the team. And out of respect, I won't share them on air here, but I was just like, my jaw was on the ground. And I watched the whole team just rally around him and said, we have fears too. And each of these are heads of departments and running this huge organization. But to be able to say, this is what we're going to talk about when we need help from each other, not how many widgets did you sell? What is it that what's the latest ROI? Not that those conversations aren't important. They are. But if they're the only conversations we're having and we're not talking about where we're struggling with trust or fear, defensiveness or receptivity or questioning or accusing or responding or reacting, if we're not dealing with that, how are we really supporting each other as leaders?
Absolutely.
All right, Jen, this has been so much fun. And we're going to be doing some more fun projects together. I know we're going to be doing a webinar on Gray Space together. And I know that we're going to be doing some other fun ideas as we kind of link up our different worlds, because we believe so much in the culture of Gray Space. And you're one of the people I love joking about. I was like, I haven't even written the book and this woman is using it. She's like, Heather, we're Gray Space. I go, Jen, you haven't even read the book yet.
I'm like, I took that and I just run with it. And I mean, every aspect of my professional career and what I'm trying to build here at the Association of Golf Merchandisers is on that foundation of Gray Space.
I love that. I love that. And I guess I want to ask you, what encouragement do you want to leave with our listeners today who might be struggling with what Gray Space can mean to them or how they get to apply it, or maybe even feeling like they've failed in providing Gray Space for their people?
I think my thought on this, like I said earlier, no one has ever failed. There's always opportunities to learn. We're always going through this life, looking back on things and seeing how we can do better and improve. This comes down to that. Just give yourself grace, or just allow yourself to do a little bit better today or tomorrow than what you did yesterday. And, if you are building that foundation within your company, within yourself, which I also believe, you need to do both. If you build that strong foundation, you just keep adding a little bit more with each and every day. And that's, I am all about establishing small wins, I lost a lot of weight a few years ago, and I never looked at that as, goodness, I need to get from X to Y. It was, I'm climbing up this mountain, and every day, some days are harder than others, but if I stay focused on that path, at different points, you can stop and look behind you, and you can see how truly far you have come. And I really do believe that gray space is a prime example of walking along a journey and just continuing to do better with every passing day.
Oh, well said. And I want to add to that too. Find your people. I think as I started putting my voice out there, I attracted people of grace, and a lot of my endorsers are those people. And I know they're people I can turn to if I am feeling vulnerability in my spaces of grace. And they're also people that are becoming ambassadors for a world that we all want to live in, which is with more kindness, more receptivity, more curiosity. We all want this, more permission to not fail, like you said, but to learn. It's not about, is this a pass or fail, but is this a learning process? And we can be hardest on ourselves. And so I think find your people. If you are leading someone and you're stepping into these spaces, find your people that get this idea of grace space, because they will be the ones that will champion it with you when you are wanting to turn against yourself, and when you're wanting to shame yourself, or you're starting to feel that shame spiral take on. And I think it comes a lot with, as your world grows and gets bigger. That's something that has surprised me in my work. I didn't realize that I too, and I'm not above it, but I just thought, since I had coached on it, talked about it, and written about it, that maybe I was a little bit more advanced. I'm not. I'm right at the same level as everyone else. And as my world has grown, I've had to find people that says, hey, can you support me in grace space? Because I'm feeling the harshness toward myself. And I'm watching people say, of course, because that's who we want to be really as humans. We just often don't know how to be invited into it.
That's such a good point. And there's so much more that you can accomplish once you find your people. That math never adds up. You get 1 and 1 and you're at 3. And it's this exponential growth, that the more that you surround yourself with the type of energy that, that you want to have on the days or the times where you might be the one lacking in that energy, to be able to surround yourself and let those around you help build you up, and you providing that in return. It's just what you can accomplish is amazing.
It really is. Thanks, Jen. Thanks for joining me today. And thanks for joining me in just the cultivating of grace space in all the spaces we live and lead in. And I'm looking forward to our next time getting together.
Me as well. Thank you so much for having me today.
You're welcome. Take care, everyone. We are cheering you on. Thanks for joining us. We had such a great time today. And obviously, we are all stepping into this life that we're made for. But isn't it nice to have a little bit of support along the way? If you want to find out more about the life that you're made for, come find me at heatherpenny.com. Go ahead and subscribe. Give us a review. That really helps us out and helps spread the word. You get to step into the life that you're made for. Cheering you on.